Good, finally we're being recorded. We missed all that fun. I'm sure y'all are tired of hearing from me. I've really enjoyed getting to work with a lot of you this week, and I really appreciate everyone's time and thoughtfulness. And before I proceed as your real life moderator of this virtual event, I have to give a call out to two of our growers who are going to be sponsoring me during this event. So we have our friends from Riddle Farm who have their Ash Creek brand, which is their chocolate-covered hazelnuts. So we posted about them in Mobilize. They have a discount. So this delightful bag of heaven, which you should pour into a bowl and eat like cereal, is yours for $10. And then we also have, can't do this without wine, so we've got Van Duzer, and they are selling online, particularly their 2012 vintages. So I thought we should recognize some of our hardworking producers and growers before we kicked off. So with that, I am going to hand it over to Skip Newberry, President and CEO of the Technology Association of Oregon.
Thank you, Kara. Big shout out to Kara for all of her hard work over the last week, but actually over many months leading up to this, as well as Alex at Sedcor and a whole cast of other characters, too many to name. But thank you for all your hard work. Thank you to all who have joined us as well. This is our first ever Agricultural Innovation Challenge Design Sprint. Over the past week, we've engaged over 60 people from states spanning Oregon, Ohio, Montana, Tennessee, Missouri, Illinois, and Vermont. And as you can see from the chat channel, a whole lot of states represented tonight on the call. In terms of some lessons learned, necessity really does drive innovation, and it's true, we can do a design sprint virtually. We've figured that out. We've also realized that we can engage individuals at a statewide level and nationwide. And the intersection of agriculture and technology really strikes a chord when so many people are able to be involved in this initial design challenge. And it effectively proves that we can continue to expand the narrative around ways that we can combine people from all over the place with rural America. So I want to introduce Sean Irvine, Economic Development Director, City of Independence, and a longtime TAO partner, to share his lessons learned and introduce our keynote speaker.
Thanks, Skip. So my name is Sean Irvine. I'm the Economic Development Director for City of Independence. Wish I could be hosting everybody in Independence in person, but I guess we will have to make do with the virtual scenario here. But like Skip said, I think this was it was a bit of an experiment, seeing if we could do it, seeing if there was a way and an opportunity to link urban and rural and add value to both sides of that equation. And I think really the answer is a resounding yes, and to great success. I've been really excited about the number of people that have been participating and engaged, and then particularly how far flung they are. I mean, Kara did a great job just kind of seeing where everybody is from on that chat, and we got people scattered all over the country, which is really a testament to how rural communities can engage their networks. If there's one thing that really works in rural communities, it's the personal networks. I guess we'll put that in a favorable way, also known as the gossip chain. But in rural communities, we're all really well connected, tied to each other. We know what's going on, and we're up in each other's business. But this is a way to get across the country and get other people involved and helping us out with our problems. And it's really fun to see it working. We had 5 office hours with our subject matter experts for the different challenges. And I love the conversations that went on. The quality of that conversation with those folks and with the participants was really incredible. It was fascinating to see the difference, the different backgrounds of the people. You've got agriculture, you've got technology, you've got folks from really kind of different environments. But they really had there was a mutual understanding there, even though they weren't necessarily from the same backgrounds. The questions that were being asked, the ways people were thinking about and answering questions, I mean, you could just see there was a connection and a mutual knowledge and respect that to me really drove home the whole point of this exercise, which was to get sort of rural agriculture and urban technology, get them connected and show how they can help each other out, leverage each other, and learn from each other at the same time. We saw from some of these challenges, we saw a couple of seemingly simple challenges or problems that ended up actually being pretty complex. And on the other hand, we saw some other challenges that really were sort of the proverbial thread that we tug on a little bit, and it turns out it's unraveling the whole sweater because it's connected to everything. But most of all, I think it really demonstrated that there is innovation and there is opportunity in rural places. That we are at our best when we're working together. We all have our assets, we all have our opportunities that we bring to the table. And if we can share them and collaborate and work together, especially, for rural communities like Independence that have the benefit of being broadband enabled, having a gigabit fiber system to be able to access these outside experts in these times we can't meet in person, that is really a great path forward. I think this has really laid the groundwork for, a better connecting agriculture and technology to build business and create jobs and make rural places more competitive. And really, that's kind of the whole point here. And so to further explore that topic, I'm really excited to introduce Pete Nelson, who's the president and executive director of AgLaunch. Pete has been actively involved in building and the support ecosystem for new agricultural enterprises for over 15 years, working with a variety of public and private sector partners. He's helped launch multiple startup companies as well as develop sector-specific initiatives to fund, incubate, and accelerate agricultural companies with high growth potential. He has encouraged his team to participate throughout the week and participate in several of the associated of our office hour events himself. It's been great having him and his people, kind of participating, really enriching that discussion. It means you should have some great perspective and feedback as we continue to evolve this type of innovation challenge. What they're doing with AgLaunch is really, really impressive, and it's somewhere that we would like to be able to get to here in Oregon and in the Mid-Valley. So Pete is joining us from Memphis, Tennessee. Again, we benefits of broadband connectivity in this day and age. But he's connecting with us from Memphis, Tennessee, and you'll probably recognize that Southern drawl just in case you were doubting where he's actually from. So Pete, take it away.
Hey, thanks, Sean. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yep.
Everybody good? Okay, I'm going to figure out sharing the screen here. That's take me just a moment. Good. Are y'all able to see some slides, everybody?
Yes, sir.
Well, really, really excited to be here with you all tonight. And it just seemed like a pretty fast week compared to kicking off on the first and kind of whatever all's gotten accomplished since then. Really appreciate Kara and Sean and Alex, because we've known now over the last couple of months of figuring out ways to work together that we kind of had a very similar vision. And that's kind of what I want to talk to you about. Part of that tonight is how we sort of think of the world and think of innovation in agriculture and what it means to communities like the community around Independence and our communities in the Mississippi Delta, and then our partnerships in other parts of the country. So I'm going to just make some comments and kind of talk through some ideas. I think I'll see, or somebody can flag me if we want to stop and pause, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end, if that sounds okay.
Yeah, Pete, if we get any questions, feel free to shoot them to me, the TAO admin, and we can also unmute people's microphones if they go to the raise hand functionality in the chat.
Sounds great. Well, just to kind of give you a little bit more background, I'm the executive director of AgLaunch. Started out as a small farmer in the Mississippi Delta region, which I'm in West Tennessee, but that's the counties in Arkansas and Mississippi and up into Missouri and Kentucky that are along sort of the mid-Mississippi River corridor. And so it's a high poverty area, super agrarian in terms of agriculture production. A lot of the major global row crops all happen to be growing there. So crops that you don't see in the Midwest, like cotton and rice, but also corn and soybeans and all the Midwest crops. And it's a really, really interesting place to think about how we bring in innovation, technology, new cropping systems. And one of the things we're learning from you all, and hopefully you're learning from us, is just the fact that agriculture is, even within a specific crop, is not homogeneous at all, and it has to be distributed and spread out, and there's all sorts of different business models and approaches. And so I'm sharing things to you that are pretty biased around thinking about row crop agriculture, but I think it can apply to how we're all sort of viewing the emerging world of ag. So, we believe in 10 years, and I tell the academic people, could be 12, could be 8, but over this next decade, that there's going to be entirely new income streams to our farmers. And you guys are in this hotbed of diverse crops and specialty crops. So you see some of this already in terms of direct connection to the end user, branded products, identity preservation for premiums around organic grains, data, ecosystem credits, and a whole bunch of other things. Pricing, probably based on health or taste, being probably one of the most important sort of changes. And there's a longer list. These are just some of them. But the question for you all, for us, is how do we go from where we are now to this sort of future where we're going to be thinking about the cropping systems very differently? What you guys kind of should think about from our perspective is that in all the rest of our arguments about why we need to have action now in various areas are based on this fundamental premise that we're starting, or we're in the middle of what I'm calling the fourth wave of innovation in agriculture. So the first wave was that few thousand-year period when we domesticated plants and animals. The second wave was the Industrial Revolution with heavy equipment and sort of the processing without as much manual labor of the crops. The third wave that we're sort of starting to move out of is this new technologies around synthetic fertilizers, vaccinations, and other types of sort of high regulatory barrier animal livestock products, biotechnology. And what's really interesting is, and this chart's not absolute, this won't pass scientific rigor, but what you'll see on the left on this chart is, that third wave led us to all kinds of huge yield improvements. In this chart, it's corn, where you see hybridization and then biotech traits and all that. But what you see on the right chart is, in parallel, a much less profitable version of farming. And you guys, where y'all live with diverse crops, this is sort of intuitive to you. For us, it's really interesting to take a step back and look at it, because what we're used to thinking, is yield of commodities. And when you start kind of going, this sort of race to the best yields on a commoditized product doesn't really get you very far in terms of building rural and on-farm value. So as we're thinking about this, we're sort of going, well, this is starting to move. We're now entering this fourth wave of innovation. And this fourth wave is really stuff you all know well, different consumer patterns for buying specialty products, organic grains, different types of ancient grains we didn't know about, even 15 years ago in the mainstream, or now, at Walmart or other mainstream outlets, different types of vegetable specialty crops. And so that whole consumer demand is pushing things in new ways. The lower cost of technology is also, affecting all these opportunities that we're able to kind of move forward on. So, I'm on this slide, it's sort of generic technologies that you would think about, AI, big data. You could add some of the things we're doing with biology now, in terms of looking at microbiome and how the soil and micronutrients in the soil affect endophytes and other things in plants. This whole, if you're sort of in the organic space, you've been thinking this way, both practically and even spiritually for a long time. We're now seeing that in the mainstream. So between thinking about biological systems in new ways and these suites of new technologies and innovation, we're entering this fourth wave. And with the fourth wave, beyond being kind of interesting, exciting, has going for us for farmers is that, unlike biotech traits and animal vaccines that are highly regulated and aren't going to make it to market very quickly, with farmers, they're costly, et cetera. All these new things have lower regulatory barriers, and farmers can participate early and actually have equity in deals by pursuing those technologies. So I work best in audiences I can see everybody. I can see Sean sitting there, maybe a couple other faces. Everybody good with the material so far? Good? So just
It's
kind
awesome,
of,
Pete.
what's that?
I said, this is awesome.
Okay, good. Well, I'm about halfway through my double of some good Tennessee whiskey, so we'll see how we go here.
Supporting your producers. That's what we encourage around here.
That's exactly right. So we've been doing some of this week, at least on the beginnings part, but just to kind of refresh us, you have these initial ideas, and it goes through this, pathway of getting the proof of concept, development, and ultimately sending some kind of product into the marketplace. I think if you're in agriculture, you know this. Most of this entire process is pretty divorced from what you would think is real sort of whole systems approach thinking around agriculture. So whole nother problem for another day, but in general, as I think some of us have probably experienced this week observing all the interactions, there's a very large disconnect between what really happens in agriculture and how to solve for that and some of the solutions that are coming to market. But this is the basic pipeline, and kind of what we have in these earlier generation technologies, biotech, ag chem, some of those other things is, you basically don't have much room for a farmer to participate. So if you're lucky, you can try the new corn variety out the year before it goes to market for everybody else, and maybe you get some free seed or fertilizer out of that. But you're way down there. You see the arrow with farmer trials at the market launch. I mean, you've had really very little to do with the evolution of the product and all that. And so in contrast, as we kind of talked about, for all these next generation technologies, lower regulatory barrier, much more, they really actually need the opposite of what biotechnology and animal vaccines need, which is, highly regulated urban environment, a lot of, stuff done in laboratories or greenhouses. For all these new next generation technologies and AI and biology, they need a lot of different kinds of farmers with a lot of different kinds of crops, with data. They need to get big feedback loops with farmers. And that's kind of what opens up both, the approach that Alex and Sean and Kara are sort of hatching over in y'all's part of the world, and what we're trying to push here, and our friends in Iowa are trying to push. So moving farmers earlier in the process, which should lead to more granular problem solving on actual solving problems that farmers have, but also opens up really interesting opportunities for farmers to be involved in participating actually as co-founders in companies, and otherwise kind of having an upside as these new portfolios are developed. Everybody track with me so far? So we talked about this a little bit. Here's some of the opportunities. You all are in the part of the world where and see a lot of this, but more biologic based sort of inputs, new types of solutions around labor, management, fuel use, other things that are really focused problems on farms, but aren't actually addressed a lot of times by the big companies. Robotics and automation, some of the new market developments and differentiating products. And there's a lot, this could be a big list, but here are some of the areas where there's opportunity for this farm level collaboration. I like this next slide because it gets to the rural development point that hopefully you've heard from our, Sean and Alex and Kara this week. But I use this picture because it's kind of interesting. All these cities look pretty similar. You can pick out a few of them. But these are the self-declared ag tech capitals of the country. So Kansas City, St. Louis, Indianapolis, Minnesota, Minneapolis and Minnesota, and there's a couple others. But there's Des Moines is one. So there's like 7, 8, 9 at least ag tech sort of mid-sized cities that are the self-declared capitals. And really the way that they've gotten to that position has been they have big corporate headquarters or universities for some of the third wave type companies. So these are the Bayers and the Cortevas and the Lancos and stuff like that. And our argument is, again, for all the stuff y'all been working on this week or we're interested in working in, we don't need this high urbanization concentration of PhDs in the same way. What we really actually need is these fields. The fields are incubators. We need the data, the access, again, the different kind of crops, and to be able to innovate and develop solutions within. So I've not seen any questions or anything. I'm assuming I should just keep moving.
You got it. We did actually put Q&A at the end, so people are just
Good,
being
okay.
good direction followers.
No, that sounds good. Everybody's good. That's we're being less disruptive as the week has gone on. That's great. So just a few other points to think about, and then we'll get to the question and answer. But one of them is just this whole, you guys, have seen, and the slide floats around all over the place, but this idea that, especially in rural America, our whole, Sears and the church and a few other institutions were what, our grandparents and great grandparents depended on. And to see that complete shift in business models, going from an old line business that, heavy capital intensive, very heavy on person-to-person contact, a lot of inventory owned, et cetera, to this sort of distributed transportation logistics model. And it's really scary for us in Memphis because we have FedEx here and is their headquarters. And just even since Amazon got into the freight business, has been unbelievably disruptive to a fixed, supposedly innovative player. So it's just really interesting to think about agriculture, an industry that fundamentally, if you're a big ag company, you by nature are heavy, capital intensive, a lot of big iron, steel on the ground, limited margins, and how do we think about disruption? And so we just, in row crop agriculture, just ended this period of going from 7 sort of big biotech seed companies to now 4. Those are on the screen, on the left of your screen. And what was really interesting is those mergers and acquisitions happened, and there was all this talk about more capital to invest in innovation, and this would be sort of the springboard for these companies to become more involved in services and IT and predictive analytics and biology. And if you look at these R&D budgets, none of them indicate that kind of sort of man on the moon investment the way that it was sort of alluded to. And so, I would argue these fixed old line ag companies are going to be part of it. They'll be there. They're for y'all's neck of the woods. They're involved in vegetables and other kinds of smaller, high value, smaller market crops. But I don't think that the big disrupted players are going to come from there. I could have put on the slide some of the IT companies, the big market caps, the Googles and others that, have done different things to make plays in agriculture. And then there's the startups. So Indigo, Farmers, Business Network, there's a few others that have really tried to come in and disrupt the entire system, not just with the technology around one piece, but disrupt it. And I'd argue that they don't have the capital. They're also trying to change the public realm and basically build an ecosystem and monopolize on that ecosystem at the same time. It's going to be very difficult. So we still have this big question mark, and we still have this sort of audacious dream or idea that with the fact that we have farmers all over this country that own physical assets, land and equipment, have a lot of they have the keys in terms of access to land resources and natural resources, and that there's still a way to connect those growers into being part of this disruptive force. And that's what obviously our organization is focused on doing. So the way we kind of think about this is we're building, if you met our partner, Spencer Stensrud, the Executive Director at Ag Ventures Alliance, they're our partner in Iowa. So we've got a Midwest and then a Mid-South Delta sort of connection that we work on trials and other things. But this is his slide, and it basically it's the ag tech sort of farmer value creation flywheel. So you basically fund a little bit of money into new startups, put those into a network of farmers, modify, build on the product, bring it to the next row in the network of farmers, the early adopters, begin to scale, get exits, generate wealth back in the communities. And the idea really is build our farmers as the ones that are going to be paying it backwards and paying it forward as they generate wealth around new innovation, technology, and opportunity, and that we'll be able to then start creating more and more companies and more impact. And our farmer network, they do a lot of the stuff that they would do for big companies, but basically we're doing it for equity and for an upside. And we're hoping that we can do some things like this similar to what we do here in Oregon. And if you go back to the sort of how do you think about solution fit, market fit, and then scale, what we've done here, that's a typical slide. I think it's a case slide or something. But we've just, our farmer network basically is involved in every piece of that and has equity in all the deals that go through our system. So a lot to be talked about there, but love to get some questions or have a little discussion.
Pete, you're awesome. What are some of the barriers to adoption from fourth wave ag? That's coming from our friends at the Kicker Innovation Center in Ohio.
The question being adoption of new technologies?
I think so. It just says, what are some barriers to adoption for fourth wave ag? So I would assume that that is,
yeah. Okay, now that helped. I mean, if you take for the biology type, and I'm making up this fourth wave sort of concept. I mean, there's different people call it different things, but for biology, I mean, you guys have a lot of experiences in Oregon, but biostimulants, bionutrients, biopesticides, they need a lot of data pulled together around them. Often they've been sold based on 2 or 3 sort of farmer testimonials without really building robust data sets. Generally, a lot of their approaches to be most efficient are going to be regional in terms of production, or even the way that solutions are matched to the problems. And so for biologics and biology-based products, that's that barrier. And then any time you're getting a farmer to change how they're mixing a product or applying it, especially if there's any kind of like equipment change, will be a little bit of a hurdle. But that one's a passable hurdle. The reason why there's so much interest is ultimately, especially if you could solve some of the weeds, we've got huge resistance issues with conventional ag chem, both for weeds and for insects and for some other types of organisms. And so, there's a lot of tailwind to create any kind of solutions in the toolkit to address those things. For IT and I'm using that loosely, and this is a good opportunity for you guys, by the way, out there with the talent and everything you all have. What has been built right now in agriculture in terms of precision ag? Garbage would be an overstatement, but it has not been built from the level of what does a farmer need in order to run their farm more efficiently. A lot of it's been built for how a big seed company can figure out how to organize their inventory or to sell more seed or control seed. That would be an example. So one of the way we're getting good uptake of growers, A, is having them organized early, but B, is having innovations and technologies that really are built based to their specifications, not what a big company is trying to push forward in the market. So love that topic. I could talk a lot more about it, but we should probably stop.
Pete, there's another one. What are the hurdles in regards to adoption of this fourth wave or IoT tech? I like that question. The hurdles from an IoT tech perspective is a good one. I think that's a question that maybe goes to broadband and infrastructure.
Yeah. The infrastructure issue I will not address. Obviously, at least in the near term, for any of the big data type applications, moving all that around without some better solutions is costly or almost impossible. What I will say is we've put a huge emphasis on technologies that require, I don't even know how to, if you think about it from a perspective of, and you'll see this if you Google or look at slide, right now we're looking at big fat field maps and maps of everybody's stuff and soil and all kinds of, and we're pulling that all up, pulling that in the cloud, doing all kind of analytics on it, and giving information back on what varieties might yield better or whatever, water management. And what we're not doing are the basic things that most of the time we don't need all that. If I'm got a 100-acre block of a crop, I've got historical information on that. We can build some much more interesting tools that don't require as much of the infrastructure to implement, just crunching the data that we already have and looking at it not in massive data sets, but just compared to year in, year out on those individual fields. So again, there's a lot to talk about there. Other hurdles in terms of just Internet of Things and getting sensors in fields. If you're going to be in any crop, it's not, you know, a perennial and set up, you know, getting stuff where you can plow over the top of it, still get good readings. And, you know, and there's a lot of questions if you're a non-ag person that you're probably looking at this industry and going, yeah, these people are crazy. We do a lot of things that it's hard to even understand why we do them. And it's not always just money or most efficient or whatever, just because most of us are attached to our land and our communities in ways that's why we're involved in farming. And so, you know, it's surprising how hard it is to find out what you need to even measure and then how to tie that back to financial models. So I can't see anybody nodding or shaking their head. So I have no idea whether this is a good answer for what you were looking for, but.
I think we have one in the chat and one that has been sent to me privately, but I'm going to call that person's name out and let them go first. Sorry, Mark, I'm going to let you go second. Skip Newberry from TAO actually has a question from the farmer equity side.
Yeah, so the notion of farmers getting equity, I'm just wondering if you could expand on that a bit, describe kind of the process and why it matters.
Well, we're refining it as we go, but the theory, I mean, we have a theory that I probably should have said very clearly and did not. We do not believe for ag tech right now, meaning all these, whether you call them ag tech or fourth wave or whatever, we do not believe that there's a ecosystem that makes sense that anybody's pushing forward. And the reason why we don't believe that, you can look at exits and how many different deals have been done over the last 4 or 5 years. There has been a lot more venture capital coming to the space, but very poor actual products that have been developed. Blue River being sold to John Deere, whatever it was, 3 years ago, Climate Course 6 years ago. Those are the things that are still held up as successes. So we fundamentally believe there is no functioning ecosystem that makes sense. That's what we're building. And so we believe that you need several things for that to work. One is, where is your base intellectual capital? Is it sitting in a university? Is it sitting with a bunch of programmers in the Bay Area? For us, we believe the base intellectual capital starts with farmers that actually understand what they're doing at a field level, make the decisions they have to make in order to manage pricing, inputs, marketing, all the stuff. If you're an ag, you understand that has to be done. From there, we go, if we've got a pool of farmers that have pulled their assets together, are willing to help scale technologies, and willing to roll up their sleeves and get engaged, then it becomes a lot more interesting to go out and basically do like what we just did this year or this last week with the challenge event, say, how do we go really address herbicide resistant weeds or spray drift or any number issue, and then go out and look for technology innovations. So when we find innovation, we're looking for early stage companies, 2-3 people with an idea, and our pitch to them is, we'll put cash, we'll run field trials, we'll give you data, we will have farmers lined up that'll be your first customers. Here's all the things we'll do if you come in and bring the farmer in as a co-founder or a small safe agreement, or depending on what the arrangement is.
Do you, just as a follow-up, do you also see like an opportunity for cooperatives where you get the scale across multiple farmers, all contributing resources and intellectual property to a project? Is there a benefit to that approach versus going with individual farmers getting equity in kind of a one-off way?
Yeah, no, there is. We do have our farmers pooled together, although not organized like from a tax purposes as a co-op, but for that very reason. But we're constantly trying to refine the model. Our partner that we operate with in Iowa is a co-op that made money in the ethanol industry and is very focused on rural development in those communities. And so we actually operate with them, and they are a farm co-op. So, and you're thinking from the way you're asking the question is the right kind of thinking on how to ultimately put this together. And Ag Launch's vision is having the right pockets of farm communities across the country, sharing resources and basically becoming the owners or partners in the next wave of technologies, not waiting for a big company to come bring them stuff.
Thanks, Pete. That's an awesome answer. Derek posted a comment in to the chat that I want to read, because he said it seems like this is a phase where data generation is the key, but application of data has not been well structured. And as we'll see as we go through these challenges, what we thought were separate challenges have really all come back to aggregation, understanding of data, and how that can be best utilized for the competitiveness of ag, not just in our state, but potentially nationally. I've got one more question from our friend Mark for the center, with the Center on Rural Innovation. And it's awesome because it touches on something that's important to us here at the association, and it's around workforce and talent development. So the question is, are FFA or 4-H running programs that support fourth wave ag?
Yeah, let me comment on that, but let me back up to the data comment real quick from Derek. The issue, I believe, with how we're thinking about data is you have to have sort of a worldview or a perspective on how you think a farm should work and how that individual farm fits into the framework of all the other farms that are working. And the more you get moving in that direction, you're thinking, the less you think like folks like to think in corn, there's 90 million acres, it's homogeneous, here's how you go out, and then what are the biggest sort of efficiency gaps, or what are the biggest nuts to crack? I would argue that the successful approaches in the future of building companies are going to be smaller problems being solved, or maybe with a little bit of a less margin, but the ability to do that multiple times under one sort of umbrella, and just kind of how we think about what we're what we're processing and how we're thinking about it from there. So love to have more of that conversation at some point. And then in terms of what I'll say, Mark, on FFA and 4-H from a youth perspective, but even in a broader sense, I'm just going to call them conservative and just, I'm using that as a generic term, sort of conservative, traditional agricultural groups. So that would be a farm credit organization in the banks, FFA and 4-H and youth development, Farm Bureau, other groups. What a lot of innovation people tend to do is sort of poo-poo those groups and just say, oh, they're kind of old school. What our belief is, and our knowledge is that these traditional groups really care about the same farmers that we care about. They are trying to morph into some of the new things that we mentioned to talk about tonight. They typically have bought into this idea of the last wave of ag innovation over the last 50 years, that big companies have to be the ones bringing the solutions to growers and the farmers. So you're going to have John Deere and Case IH and then the big chem companies and others. And so those are all areas where I think that there's some openness for guidance and partnership that hasn't been there in the past. And then in particular with those two organizations, they are pushing a pretty heavy like precision ag and data and all those things in their entrepreneurship. So hope that helps a little bit. These are all great. Love to have a conversation all night. Thank y'all for having me. Great to be here.
And Pete, I will say we've got 2 more questions that are out there, but what I'm going to do is put them in the mobilized group tomorrow morning, because we'd love to keep this conversation going.
Okay.
But we do want to let some of our challengers pitch, so I'll get those out to everybody, and maybe you can be our guest answerer. And I know that not everybody loves it, but we'll give you a little bit of my applause sound so that everyone can give you a round of applause. Thank you so much for joining us and spending so much time with us. You were awesome. I'll get those questions in there, and we'll get answers to them tomorrow. So Morgan and Laura, thank you. All right, it is now my pleasure to get to introduce my partner in crime over the last 6 months. I only have Alex in my notes, and he's better at saying his last name than I am, so I will allow Alex to talk about the next phase of our evening, which is introducing our judges and hearing our challengers present back some of their ideas, solutions, and findings.
Thank you, thank you. My name is Alex Parasquivas, and I work for a regional economic development organization called SEDCOR. And I'm the Rural Innovation Catalyst, like I mentioned last week, which is sort of a lofty title. And but this is the kind of the culmination of a lot of the work that I've been doing for the last 18 months, but also sort of the start, of the next step of the next phase of work for these kinds of projects. Pete, thank you so much for your comments. I sit here nodding my head a whole bunch as you talk. And it's nice to find like-minded folks who are doing the similar work, so thank you. I do want to introduce our judges tonight, and I will introduce them and then let them sort of provide a little bit of introduction for themselves. Our first judge is Josh Carter from the WeWork Labs. So Josh, if you want to say.
Yeah, can everybody hear me?
Yep.
Cool. Thanks everybody. My name is Josh Carter. I'm a local area serial entrepreneur turned venture capitalist. I also run an accelerator program in Portland called WeWork Labs. It's an industry agnostic accelerator program. Most accelerator programs are cohort based and they come with some sort of funding. We do neither. We're a perpetual program and we don't provide any funding. So, but we have 85 locations around the globe. We have 5,000 founders within the program globally. So we're able to connect people with resources, mentors, investors, et cetera. And the way people get access to the program is through a membership, which is pretty low cost, about $380 a month to get access to this program. For the winner here, we're happy to give them access for the first month free to get access to the program. So good to be here. Thank you for including me.
Well, thank you for participating. Our next judge is Laura Rumbel, who works at Intel and is one of our, I'd say, key partners in doing this kind of work. And it has been an absolute pleasure to work with her for the last 18 months. So Laura, if you're there, you want to introduce yourself or give a little bit more?
Sure. So nice to be here. My name's Laura Rumbel. I work at Intel. I work in the Internet of Things business unit at Intel, specifically in the Industrial Solutions Division portion of IOTG. Again, we love our acronyms at Intel. Apologies if I throw it out there. Please hold me accountable. I have been working with Sean and with Alex for the last, few years now. We've engaged on several ag tech POCs or proof of concepts focused around the area of independence with independent producers and partnering those opportunities with Intel technologies. So it's been a wonderful, rich partnership, and I'm excited to be here. One of the things that we do at Intel, or that's under my job purview, is to work with or to identify key new technologies or new opportunities, prototype solutions to address those particular needs, implement them in the field where they would be most utilized and in the geography where they would be implemented, and then evaluate them with the company of interest, optimize based off of the key findings, and then iterate. So again, that magic formula, again, that was kind of described earlier, is definitely in our wheelhouse, what we do every day. And again, we've demonstrated that in the past with both Sean and Alex. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to hear the pitches.
Thank you, thank you. Our third judge is Gary Neuschwander, who works as a trade development manager for the Oregon Department of Agriculture. We call him the Noosh. He is one of the nicest and just most sort of knowledgeable folks about all agriculture in Oregon. So Gary, if you're there, if you want to say a few more words, yeah.
I'm here. Hey, it's great to be here. I'm really excited. It has been really cool to see everybody's engagement in ag, and particularly to see people as they've engaged with farmers and folks, that aha moment of ag is cool. And I've seen that. It makes my day. Alex is smiling because he's one of the first ones that I seen him really become a voice for ag and where he's coming from. And I really can't wait to see on this side of what is possible and new solutions, because there's so many new partners on the stage today. I'm really excited to see it. I come from a grass seed ag background of Oregon. I've worked in agriculture, Department of Ag for 25 years. And I think every day I'm amazed that, oh my, I couldn't believe we could do that. They're still having that problem. And I have the fun job with the Department of Ag, connecting people to solutions. So I'm excited today to see if there's solutions out there in a direction that maybe this can go. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And we have an extra last minute guest judge as well. We're really excited to have Catherine Helms, who's the Chief Data Officer for the state of Oregon, listening in and participating. So Catherine, if you want to just say a few words.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Catherine Helms. I'm the state's Chief Data Officer, and I joined the state about a year ago, and my role has really been around driving innovation and maturity for how the state manages data. And so, when we talk about these concerns around data security, data generation, all of these components are challenges that the government deals with as well. And I would say that we even deal with the same ecosystem of not necessarily always having our innovation partners understand our specific needs. So something that I've been working on in the state is really trying to drive improved data sharing and then using that to help improve digital transformation as well. So when we think about regulation or interactions that individuals have with governing bodies or the government, how can we make those interactions easier or more streamlined or more efficient, or collect that data once so that we don't have to do it multiple times. So that's my role, and I'm really excited to be here and hear all of these projects today.
Well, thank you so much for your time. So let's, I think we'll roll into the pitch back, sort of the meat of tonight. And our first, the first challenge that we're gonna hear about is the clean grass seed. And I'm gonna call on Jim, I think, to talk about sort of the challenges and maybe lessons learned from what was obviously a difficult project from the outset. But so if Jim, you want to, or someone from Jim's team.
Yeah, let me pass this over to my colleague, Mark Bauman, who's a longtime software engineer and also a drone pilot.
Hey, can you guys hear me okay? Or is that a yes?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks. I thought I saw somebody throw a thumbs up, but I got the grid view going, so just saw a little movement. Anyways, yeah, I'm Mark Bauman. I'm working with Jim on the Ag Check team. I don't have a formal presentation for this, and I'll be honest with you, this is going to be a really short discussion on my point. What we really found after drilling down with Dylan, we went to the office hours, had a lot of questions for him. What we really got back as trying to find the core piece of the problem was that the manual detection of the weeds and the problem crops for him are really the most important or efficient way to deal with it. In other words, a human being spotting something using a weed killer product on the areas that they need to do was really the most efficient way that technology probably wasn't going to solve. As we drill down a little bit further on that, we realized that this really was a staff management issue having to do with resource deployment, scheduling for production issues, that type of thing, and not sort of the true technology-based problem that we would think of. So, I spent 25 years in the high-tech industry. I managed teams around the world, oftentimes remotely, multiple sites. So I've seen a lot of HR issues. My experience tells me that if there's any type of technology that we would put towards this, it would be some type of human resource management software or HRM, in dealing with how do you find the staff, how do you schedule them on the days you need them, know their skill set, that type of thing. So with that, I'd say, our core skill set in the group that we have really didn't speak to that type of solution. And so we're sort of begging out of presenting anything more detailed since we really don't have the expertise to solve the problem in that way.
That's great. And I think even as we were putting together these challenges, this one felt probably the largest or sort of the biggest to tackle. but we do have some next steps for this project. I would say just from our end of things, I think Kara will share maybe some of those next steps because we didn't want to see this one. We didn't want to see this one drop, to be honest. So, because grass seed's a really big part of what we do around here. So.
Thanks, Alex. Yeah, we knew this one was going to be really complicated, and it's hard to tell Dylan no because he's so darn passionate, and like we are so enthusiastic to support him. So during the course of the week, as we got this feedback from Jim and Mark and their team, we actually reached out to OSU, not just Ag Extension, but they've got a makerspace that are doing some 3D printing, and kind of talk through the process of what it would take to get this as a capstone project. And there is a professor out in Hood River that is building some technology that does some of this identification on the color spectrum and could potentially be used to target weeds. And so the process would be, for a capstone, you need a professor, a company, and a sponsor. So between Sedcor, Riddle Farms, and the professors at OSU that are already working on this, we're going to meet in the next couple of weeks and work with them to see if we can make it a viable capstone running into the fall semester. And so we may have a solution, or at least something that is being worked on through spring of 2021. So we think that's pretty cool.
Yep. Thank you, Kara. So I guess we'll move on to the next challenge, and we have a couple presenters, it looks like, which is the wine goggles. All the jokes around everybody's wearing wine goggles all the time in the Valley, but here we are. I'm going to start with the Cricker Innovation Hub, if you guys want to present sort of what you're doing.
Okay. Can you all hear me well?
Yep.
My computer microphone is not working, so I am using my headset microphone. So
We hear you fine, thank you.
turn that off. All right, so let's see if I can share here. I think this. Okay, so hopefully you are seeing these slides here. And I guess to start off, we're of course going to, that is not what I'm looking for. We are of course going to start off with some introductions. So my name is David Kilroy. I am the director of a business incubator in Portsmouth, Ohio, for a small state university. And we were actually on a startup weekend last weekend. And when that was postponed, we thought, well, why don't we take a look at some virtual events, see what's out there, and see what might work for our community. So that was kind of the lens that we came to this event with. And finding this problem, we thought it was really interesting. We thought we could find some technical solutions and really enjoyed having an opportunity to work through it. So that was a longer introduction than I had intended for. But with that, I'm going to pass it off real quick to Morgan Hall to introduce himself. Morgan, you there? I'm not sure if Morgan is unmuted or not, but he brings a background in business development, finance, business lending, and so he was invaluable to have on the team as well with that perspective. And then also real quick, I'm going to ask the third member of our team, who is actually my brother, to introduce himself.
Hi, my name is Dan Kilroy. I am an environmental earth science and sustainability major at Miami University. I joined this project to learn more about the business and tech side of agriculture. I get a lot of information about the environmental side in school and news, and I wanted to see the different factors that go into this side.
All right, so kicking things off,
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, Morgan, take a second.
Oh, great. Hi, so my name is Morgan Hall. I do a lot of business development and commercial lending, especially in agriculture, renewable energies, and waste to energy.
Okay, thank
so
you.
currently I've decided to work with David because I was one of the co-hosts of startup weekend, and we thought we could work together on this.
Yeah. So as Morgan pointed out, we hosted a startup weekend last year and really enjoy these types of events. So the title of our presentation is Seeing the World Through Grape-Colored Glasses. And the first thing we're going to do, of course, is define our challenge for the judges, because we're not entirely sure if how familiar they are with the challenge. We are developing a solution to help the field workers to better differentiate between ripe and almost ripe Pinot Noir grapes. And there's a couple of key things in there that we will pull out as we go. So further defining our challenge, for our question and answer session, we worked with Bruce Sonnen, who is the vineyard manager for Van Duzer Vineyards in Oregon. And they have a modest 80 to 120 acre vineyard, and normally have around 4 to 5 in a crew to go out and thin, pick, and sort the grapes. And one of the things that he really pointed out was that small vineyards like Van Duzer can't afford the $250,000 automated systems. That's something that really only the large vineyards can afford, that are producing 40 to 50,000 cases a year. And that is, in Oregon, that's only 7 out of 750 vineyards, approximately. So for the other 743 vineyards, there's a need for a solution that doesn't cost that much, but still, produces returns. So with that, we kind of came up with a couple key limitations that if we were going to find a solution, it had to really fit within. The first, of course, is that a high-tech solution currently exists that is fully automated and incorporates a lot of this technology. Meanwhile, small vineyards can get by with the status quo now. They can continue to send people out without any type of equipment and, be sustainable with what they are. So we had to fit something within that. To clarify, that's something that was easy to replace if lost or broken, affordable to purchase for multiple field workers, and really looking for a good enough solution, not a perfect solution, not something that was 100% accurate all the time, but at a certain cost produced certain benefits. And of course, adding on to that was the fact that there was no internet connection in the vineyard. So, if we had a technical solution that would need that, we wouldn't be able to use it. So with those limitations, we started doing some research. And, of course, for this challenge, none of us are farmers. None of us work at the vineyard. And frankly, there was a learning curve just to understand, what does this challenge mean? And so going into, what our research was in how grapes ripen, there are both chemical and physiological changes. The sugar content is increasing, fruit acidity is decreasing chemically, and then physiologically, the anthocyanin is, turning the berries darker purple. So on this chart on the right here, you can see, the grapes are green, they're green, they're green. All of a sudden, they hit veraison, and they start to turn pink. The sugar content increases, and then they start to turn purple. So based on that, and in our conversation with Bruce, we really zeroed in on this physiological color change as a good enough indicator of ripeness. So knowing that it wouldn't be perfect, but we could get approximately to that 24 degrees brick that Van Duzer Vineyards is aiming for. And really what I want to point out here is that they don't need help differentiating between green grapes and purple grapes. They need help differentiating between dark pink and purple grapes. That's really what we're looking for. So the color spectrum there that they're looking for is narrow. And that's a key part of what we're going to get into here. Other research that we did focused on the grape picking process, more information that Bruce shared. For example, this isn't starting from scratch. The vineyard manager already goes out, takes a representative sample, tests the average brick level, and determines, all right, when am I going to send a field crew out to do this? And they do a color pass, they cut unripe clusters off the vine. That's the first check. They check them again when they're brought into the warehouse on the conveyor belt, and then the grapes are sent to the destemmer to start wine production. So there's 2, maybe 3 opportunities to see these unripe grapes and cut them off before they get to the wine production. And one thing that's not on the slide that Bruce mentioned is, 1 out of every 20 grapes, if it is below the level they're looking for, is enough to pull the average down so that it's below the quality that they would expect for their wine. So there really is a need for a solution that is accurate, even if they're not quite looking for perfect. So now, of course, developing our solution, with all of these limitations, with all of our research, how did we approach the challenge, and what type of technology did we think would be the best fit for this problem? And to understand that, you have to understand, again, zeroing in on color as the key to our solution here, which both our team and actually Bruce independently came to that conclusion. You have to understand that humans see light through cones, and that color is transmitted through light photons with varying wavelengths. And when they hit the cones in our eyes, we start to differentiate between these colors. And there's a lot of really interesting research out there that we got into to kind of understand, from a scientific standpoint, what does this challenge mean? But the key thing here is you might start to ask yourself, all right, well, if the point here is to help someone differentiate between colors, what about people who can't differentiate between colors? How might that, help? Because I don't know if any of you have seen the video, someone puts on these N-chroma color correcting glasses, all of a sudden they can see bright, vibrant colors. Could that type of technology have any kind of application for what we're trying to do here? And of course, the reason I'm showing this is because the answer is yes. So we actually, with all of our research, we started with an AI AR solution, and talking with Bruce really solidified that it would be too expensive to create a realistic solution for these small and medium-sized vineyards. So we started to explore these Enchroma glasses. We communicated with Andy Schmieder, who is the CEO and co-founder of Enchroma, and he is confident that color correcting glass technology could enhance the visual perception of wavelengths within the blue color spectrum. Now, these glasses cost approximately $250, $350 on their own, without us having to go in and redevelop the technology and apply it towards what we're trying to do. So, clearly there's a price point here that we need to work within. The statement that we really came up with for our solution is that the glasses that we want to develop as part of this challenge adjust the quantal catch of the photopigments within our eyes to highlight the specific colors that the viewer would look for in almost ripe grapes. Now, this is the key sentence here, and this is the part that I want to just talk a little bit more about for our solution. We approach this challenge as trying to figure out, are we highlighting the blues? Are we highlighting the purples, these grapes? Do we want to highlight the ripe grapes? Or on the flip side, do we want to highlight the grapes that aren't ripe? And that's really what we decided to build on. We want the field workers to be able to say, hey, that grape right there has more pink in it than all of the other grapes. And while they might not be able to see that more reliably without the glasses would help them to say, hey, yes, that definitely is a grape we need to remove. So one of the things that Bruce mentioned is for green grapes, they can use a specific brand of hunting glasses that makes green colors really pop. And that's enough to kind of differentiate between the different colors. And that was the exact same type of solution that we wanted to bring here. And we did look into AR and AI, and just frankly, it is not a tenable solution for this market based on our assumptions about the market. Our challenge client really expects farmers to look for an affordable seasonal solution to last two seasons at most. That would be the expectation. And a solution that really increases the marginal accuracy and speed at a lower cost than the current technology on the market. So we would aim for our technology to cost $250. And frankly, if it was above $250, farmers would not be able to afford it. And we really wanted to, actually, as Pete mentioned earlier, we really wanted to listen to our client, listen to the farmer, make sure we were developing a solution that fit their needs. and not go above and beyond and create something that wouldn't work for them, that they couldn't afford. We estimate that this would reduce the field hand labor costs and training costs by 8 to 10%. And we would expect, based on our conversations, that $45,000 would help us to create a minimum viable product for a prototype for this, for the next steps of this challenge, I suppose. And so with that, when it comes to wine production, seeing is believing. Thank you very much. And I think I might have gone over, but I appreciate you all listening to our presentation.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much. I appreciate that you did a little bit of lead in to describe the challenge as well, because I should have done that. Instead of waiting towards the end, I'm going to actually ask our judges to weigh in after this challenge. So we'll have or do we, I guess, never mind. Let's have the judges weigh in right now, I guess. And if they're around.
I'm here, Alec. This is Gary.
And Laura's here too.
Okay.
Josh is here.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a question if I could. Is that okay? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Please.
Perfect. Hey, guys, great presentation. I thought the solution was really cool and well thought out. You guys clearly were looking at this from a different perspective. The question, you made a really interesting comment towards the end of your presentation where you said you're reducing the labor cost by 8 to 10%, but that the farmers don't think that the unit costs would be worth it if it went above 250 per unit. How many units do you think a farmer would have to buy in order for this to be effective? And why do you think, if you're reducing costs by 8 to 10%, why do they think that 250 is too big of an investment?
When we talked with Bruce, what he was actually looking for when it came to prices, he said the lower the better. I'm looking for a $50 piece of equipment that I can essentially buy for the season, not have to think about it again. And if they lose it, if it gets broken, it doesn't matter because it's so cheap. And we knew that we would not be able to develop anything that was at that price point. So we thought that, all right, let's kind of increase the amount of R&D essentially that will go into it, really make it more than just a color tinted glasses. And what would that look like? And based on our research conversations with Andy, that $250 is about what we could manufacture and sell it for. The 8 to 10% comes from both out in the field, how quick you can go through the vineyard, how quickly you can move it through the warehouse, and then training costs, or they bring on a crew of new employees. Do they have to, what's the learning curve, I guess, for that? So those three factors kind of come into the 8 to 10%. And in terms of the price point, and why we don't think that would be tenable, or why we don't think a higher price would be tenable, it comes down to what Bruce told us about. He's not looking to make an investment in something that would be multi-year necessarily. He's looking for something that he knows will work this season for his, to answer your other question, for his 4 to 5 field workers, and one pair of glasses for each of them. And that he can, if he buys them again next season, great. So those were the assumptions and limitations we were working with.
Thanks.
This is Laura Rumbel from Intel. Great presentation, really impressive. A lot of work went into that, and that's reflected in the outcome. I have a couple of questions. The very first one is there a minimum lighting requirement, UV requirement, or lumen requirement for the functionality of the glasses to work and meet the specifications or requirements?
That is an excellent question. And from what I've seen, the way that the glasses function, in the same way, I guess I would answer it in the same way that you wouldn't be able to differentiate between colors as a non-colorblind person in the dark. With less light, it would still scale for someone who's wearing these glasses However, and specifically for the colorblind glasses, it would scale. So brighter light, you're better able to see the vibrant blues that we would highlight, using these lenses, lens. But I guess if you're asking, would they stop working? The answer is no, they would not stop working.
Got it. Okay, great. And then my second question was to kind of build on that a little bit. Obviously this is a higher initial investment, but anyway, if there was interest, or if you guys thought in your initial research and SWOT analysis about taking this to a camera lens and having that be implemented in a drone or some sort of autonomous technology, instead of having it, with an AI accelerator, instead of it being required to rely on a human interpretation of that color.
Yes, we did. We talked about that, and I'm wondering, can you all still see my screen right now?
It says wine goggles, and it has.
No, we don't see your screen yet.
Okay. I did have 2 slides at the end here, just in case someone asked that question, and because
Justin,
that was
we have to pivot and give the team back the option to share.
To answer your question, there's a lot of increasingly technical solutions we could work with that create lenses that can really perceive color well, using optical metasurfaces, and convolutional neural networking.
Yeah.
And we do believe that for the larger vineyards, an expensive system like that would be effective. I can't say it would be more cost effective, and I can't say exactly what it would take to get there. But the answer is yes. We did explore that, and we do think that bringing together, augmented reality, AI, and this type of lens technology would be effective there.
Thank you.
Hey, can you guys hear me? This is Morgan Hall.
Hi, Morgan.
Yep.
Hey guys. So one of the things that Bruce had mentioned is that for larger vineyards, they effectively, when they are picking out their berries, they have automated machines that effectively just shake out the grapevines, and it gets stems and bugs, and it can effectively lower their overall quality of their wines. So they only get one chance of pulling out all of the extra contents and picking out the exact ripened berries. So for larger vineyards, one of the applications, as far as saving money would be, is increasing the effectiveness of them pulling out those berries when it enters the conveyor belt stage, because that's their only time of being able to actually pick it out before it goes into production.
Yeah, that's probably what, if we were to develop that type of system, that's what we'd aim for.
Gary, did you have any other questions that you wanted to ask before we move on?
I thought these guys did a great job on their research, and they landed, right in the right place with the issues they're having. The other question I had, or comment, the training cost perspective was right on. The reduction of getting new employees into the field and accurately making reliable ID. The other part, if you're looking at 10 units a year, that's $2,500. If they're just looking at training cost, did you happen to look at, would there be improvement in the percentage of low brix fruits that's improved, an ability to increase the quality of the wine? I mean, do you think they'll be able to do better in the field at identifying it?
The answer is yes, and I purposefully did not include that in our value proposition, because it's almost too ambiguous, and in my opinion, based on so many other factors. If I was to go and pitch a product like this to a farm, to a vineyard, that would kind of be almost the icing on the cake. Also, by the way, you will theoretically create better wine.
Yeah. And that was my thought. I mean, that's a selling point right there because it's so wine's so competitive, and it would give you an edge at a relatively low cost. So thank you guys. You guys were awesome. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Our next.
Wait,
oh,
hold
sorry.
on, Alex. Hold
What's
on.
that?
I
Yeah.
gotta do it. I gotta do it.
Oh, God. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara.
I will note that we are probably going to go longer than we anticipated, so appreciate everybody sticking around because I think this is really, really interesting. This is very compelling. Our next presentation is from Kaylee, I think, if she's there. Nope, it's another wine goggles. Or not?
Yep, wine goggles was really, really popular. And what's interesting is it's really, really popular across the entire country because Kaylee is one of our folks from Montana. So
perfect.
There we go. We provided filler for you while we dealt with the technical part.
Yay.
Take it away, Kaylee.
All right, so this is kind of great going second. You guys did a really fantastic job introducing what the challenge was, so I don't have to do all that, which is good because I didn't prepare for that anyway. So yes, I am also pitching for the wine goggles. My name is Kaylee Hunt. A little bit about me and why I chose this project is, well, first and foremost, I enjoy wine. Aside from that, I wish I could have been part of all of these projects. They're fantastic and just amazing to see. I am not an ag person with my background, so this is all pretty much new to me. A little bit about my background. I do have a BS in physics. I've got both hardware and software quality experience. So this was kind of exciting with the hardware. And with that, I did AOI, which is optical inspection machines. So I know firsthand the cost and the joys of programming them to be correct every time. I also did some research, and the cheapest machine I could find was $75,000, which is still a bit much. After talking to Bruce, he did make the comment of, you know, if you'd really like it to be $50 or less. So the problem, as was mentioned before, is trying to make it easier to recognize the not so ripe grapes. This is both in the field, where they thin the vines, and as after, after the harvest. So my initial thought was after harvest, so it would be inside. And then Bruce said they talked about thinning the vines. And so that kind of changed my point of view about what would be possible. All right, so he gave us some pictures to look at. The one on the left is the one on the vine that they're going through and looking at. You can see the one in the foreground has a little bit of pink, some greens. So this one would actually be good to keep on the vine. The one behind it has a lot more green, so that would be one to take off the vine. The one on the right is harvest. You can see they're a lot more uniform with the darker color. So I decided to focus on this little grape right here to see about emphasizing that one and making it stand out. I also was playing with the colors and the filters, using some photo analysis. I played with the colors and looked at one of the darker purple colors, and there were different ways of trying to make those stand out. One was to make the darker ones hide. So that one is more of an RGB thing where you kind of say, okay, subtract the color from 255 and that should make the dark one hide. So that result was kind of a grayish, brownish green color, which really didn't give me what I was looking for. So I kept playing a little bit. Another Google search result I had was for color correcting makeup. And so that one suggested peach tones to cancel out the blues. I have sunglasses with different lenses. So I figured, oh, hey, you know, I can easily look and see which colors of my glasses tend to make things pop. So then came the solution, Pinot glasses. Not exactly these ones, because the rose-colored glasses didn't quite give me the results I was looking for, but brown did. So I was looking up where my sunglasses were purchased, and apparently brown lenses are specifically made to improve contrast and filter out blue light. I don't know if you can see this, but on my screen, it makes this little grape pop out a little bit more for me, or a lot more, it depends on how bright it is. Not having actual grapes in the field to test makes this a little bit more difficult to prove whether they'll work or not. But again, we can wait in August. Wait until August, which is when would be a best place to field test these. So the vision for this is hopefully those brown safety glasses are perfect. I found them on Amazon. They're $31.50 for 12. So that would be less than $3 each. If those don't work, there are, you know, different ways to figure out the exact tint of glasses that that would work. And then of course, sharing our findings with the rest of the vineyard world. Phew, and that was fast.
That was great. Thank you so much. If our judges have some questions to ask Kaylee, I'll entertain those.
Kaylee?
No, it was great. Good job.
Thanks.
Hey, do you have any idea how much the amount of light would affect wearing the glasses, just regular sunglasses? I mean, if you're in the shade or dim light, would they effectively do the same thing as full sun?
With the brown tinting, so I actually tried both. I have some that are the lighter colored lenses that are shown, and then some that are actually polarized and a lot darker. And at least looking at my computer screen, they were very similar results.
Thank you.
Josh or Laura, do you?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is Laura Rumbel. I was wondering, have you only tested in what we would call a lab test, right? Or
yes,
a simulation? Okay, so not actually in the field. Did you do any testing with actual like red table grapes or green grapes at all? I mean, was it that was how you built your simulation, or were you looking at images online, right, through a computer screen and running your evaluation?
So mine were purely images online.
Okay.
I was playing with filters, so I added a brown filter at 64%, which seemed to be the best. That's how I was looking with the different colors of filters.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
great.
again, nothing with real sun. In Montana, we still have snow, so didn't really. And of course, being at home, I didn't have any grapes that I could go purchase and compare either.
Gotcha. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Josh, anything from you?
No, just great job.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great. Well, I'm assuming Kara has her fancy applause app ready to go.
Hello, yeah, we can't do anything without some, I don't even know what it sounds like over the phone. It probably sounds like death. Okay, yay, clap, awesome job. Oh, no, now we've got other things playing. I also really appreciate having a woman present, because I was like, I've never heard a pitch where we've used colored makeup. So I love the diversity of perspective. So thank you so much, Kaylee, for doing that.
Our next challenge was this ag process challenge, the approval process challenge, and I'm gonna actually, I think Kara and I are gonna cover this one. It sort of rolls up a little bit into the Data Hub challenge, but we'll quickly go over. I would like to go over what the challenge was and sort of what we think as can happen sort of next steps and going forward. So as I'm filling time, the agricultural approval process.
And
So,
since I'm part of the presentation team,
yeah.
I can just take over the share. So there we go.
Yeah, so this was inspired by the Rick Rial Dairy. The Rick Rial Dairy is, I think I mentioned last week, my favorite place on earth. They are a small dairy, relatively small dairy, 3,500 cows, milking about 1,700. And they're in the unincorporated town of Rick Rial, which is about 10 minutes from Independence. So if you want to go ahead, I think Kara snuck in a slide. Yes, of course, of
A cow.
a baby cow. So that's how it is.
I love them too.
Yeah. So really the basis of this challenge was right here in this infographic. And so this is sort of the regulatory environment that the Rick Rial Dairy operates in. So you can see at the top of the chart, you have the state of Oregon and the Department of Ag, multiple sort of reports and to different sort of departments within there. Of course, you know, you have the animals and sort of animal reporting going to the USDA, and then also even producers, or rather the commercial side, Walmart and Costco. You have the FDA. I mean, sort of, there's about 20 or 21 sort of different regulatory or different reporting bodies that that the Rick Rial Dairy reports to, and this isn't accounting for, you know, revenue or, you know, taxes or anything else. So this is just their kind of day-to-day operation reporting. So this is where it stemmed from. It seemed like I bet we could. Yeah, there's a challenge here that we can probably solve with a little bit of streamlining. So
the one thing that we saw when we looked at this was, okay, if I had to have a global view of my business with all those different arrows, that would be really, really challenging. And this doesn't include every reporting agency or body that has to happen to run your business. And so the way that we looked at this was product. So from the animal perspective, the food production perspective, employees, staff, so your resources, and then your resources from a facility standpoint, so anything like internal operational. And Alex, I don't know if you want to go or you want me to go.
Yeah, go ahead.
So what we heard, and I think that it's probably true for all of our producers, but it's particularly painful for our producers of dairy, is that there is a good bit of information that is shared repeatedly. And so we broke this out with, after a conversation with Nate, where it was the herd data is what always has to be inputted from that product standpoint. And that includes things like how many cows are in the herd, how many are producing milk, and how many acres is that on. At Rick Rial, that's not a huge shift in every month. That stays pretty consistent. And this data is collected by, at a minimum, this was just off the top of Nate's head, USDA, ODA, so the Oregon Department of Agriculture, EPA, FDA, Dairy Gold, private sector, the producer of or the supplier once the milk is turned into cottage cheese and whatnot. And that was just in the course of like a 30-second conversation. So they're submitting this pretty regularly, very redundantly, mostly on paper, multiple times a month. And so the example that we used was for the USDA survey, and my background is in tech consulting, so I knew what my dollar per hour cost was and how that affected my profitability. And so when I heard this was just kind of the example that was glaring, that this is a survey that's filled out 12 times a year. It's mailed as a paper form. The herd data is always entered, and so that process takes 15 minutes per form, which in a month doesn't sound like a ton. But when you add that up, you know, it's about an hour a quarter, which is then 4 hours a year, and that's one form, and there's dozens. So you multiply 12 forms times 4 hours a year, and you're literally talking about 48 hours, or the equivalent of an entire week and a day, to filling out forms with redundant data.
I'll just add that this is an operation that doesn't ever take a day off. You know, the cows don't stop. They take one milking shift off on Christmas Day. And so they only milk twice on Christmas Day instead of 3 times. So just for context.
and for context, like, I don't know how much folks know about dairies, but they do not turn a profit until the 30th or 31st day of the month. So in February, it's actually a losing proposition. So to say you could get 6 days back in your year is pretty compelling from a margin perspective. So this is kind of where Alex and I sort of paused, because the next two challenges are really going to talk more about data that's submitted, that's publicly available, and we know that this sort of rolls into that larger challenge. So we don't really have a solution. We just wanted to kind of share that, you know, right now those are silos and the herd data goes in each one, and it would be awesome if it could just go into one silo and then go into each of those forms. I'm not a super technical person, so I don't know how that happens, but I know there's a bunch of people on the phone that are. And then our next steps or thoughts would be that there can be a larger data aggregation, that there's perhaps some interoperability between the data sets, that workflow technology could be deployed for greater business process improvement. And we hope that that could be through a statewide data hub, which would then provide increased operational efficiency for our producers. So we hope that y'all don't have questions for us. We're just really teeing it up for the next two challenges, and we didn't want any challenge to feel like they had not been addressed. And Nate was super pumped that we may be able to provide him with 48 hours back in his life.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, again, I'll offer anybody who's down in this area, who's participated in this this week's challenge, that I will happily set up a tour of the dairy. I've done it 6 or 7 times. It's my favorite thing to do. It's a great, great place, and it's a very, very interesting look at a dairy. So,
Hey, Alex, can I throw something in here?
Please.
I thought about this one a lot, and I had to add my 2 bits in. Hopefully my boss isn't watching, of giving this insight. But the ultimate barrier to this one was, it's about making your reviewer, auditor, inspector happy. And you have to ask yourself, how do you do that? You know, you give them the info that they want in the format they want, in numerical order or whatever their form looks like. And being an auditor for Good Ag Practices, you saw how people would do that. Even though they had the data elsewhere, they knew to make you happy by putting it in the order that it was on your sheet. So that was one of the barriers that I saw to this. I wonder if anybody would address, but thought I'd throw that out there.
No, I appreciate that. Yeah, I think, yeah, I'm hoping sort of this data hub piece that we're going to roll, that we're sort of rolling towards, would be an elegant solution to that, to cultural, you know, because that's a culture shift.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think for Alex and I, we personally really just like this one, and I think it's both because we really like Rick Rial Dairy and what they're doing, and if you're following what's going on in the news right now, milk prices are down, and there's this whole conversation around, do we dump our milk, what are we doing? I think it probably is the least sexy, but we also feel like it's the one that could provide some immediate short-term operational efficiencies, and that was, you know, our ultimate goal out of this, is how do we make life easier for our producers.
Well said. Thank you so much. We'll roll to the next challenge, which is sort of the What's That Crop app or idea. I'm going to turn to Jim. Jim, do you want to put some context around it? Do you want me to provide that? I don't know, sort of the extent of what you're presenting about.
I could provide context in the presentation, but
sure.
you.
Yeah, I would say, and I think I mentioned last week when we were opening these challenges, this to me is one of the more important challenges that we did in terms of sort of education piece for consumers and for citizens of Oregon. We talk a lot on our team about sort of urban-rural divide and sort of teaching what agriculture looks like. And you know, the soapbox that I'm always on constantly is that all Oregonians should be proud of what we grow and the way we grow it. And so I think, to me, this is one of those sort of intersectional kind of projects or challenges. And so it's absolutely near and dear to my heart. So with that, I guess what's that crop, I suppose, it's pretty obvious from one of the challenges. I think, we were talking about getting people to be able to interact with growers, or at least know what's grown in their area. And then, I'm always about sort of why that matters. Like, what does ryegrass mean? What is it used for? What's that market look like? How much money does it bring into the state? And that these are all really important things, and that Oregon is an agricultural place that has an economy that is, based on agriculture. So this is one of those steps. So Jim, sorry I interrupted you, but I'll let you go.
Oh, it's all good. Sure, let me share my screen. Cool, y'all can see my screen right now?
Yep, we can see you.
Wonderful. All right, my name is Jim Couples, and I worked on the What's That Crop Challenge. So let me go into that. The challenge was to develop a tool that would help people understand what crop they're seeing. So what farm is this, and what are they growing here? Enable interaction with the farmer or rancher. How do we connect with the farmer? How do we connect the farmer with the interested public? And then as well, a tool that would help market those products to customers. Where and how can they buy these products? So I was kind of lucky on this because I had already been working on something called All the Farms. And I'll walk you through this. And this is definitely not the last step, but this is a pretty straightforward database where if you enter an Oregon address, do something near me, I'm down here in Springfield, you can do a regular search, or you can search on things like products, which was one of the things that we thought people would be interested in. Farming practices, over here is certified organic, and then these 5 cover crops, crop rotation, and so on are kind of the pillars for regenerative agriculture. And then as well, availability, so CSA, farm stands, and products like that. But I'll just use it according to this local address. If you click that, what you'll return are a bunch of farms that are local in the area, as well as some thumbnail pics of them. And then if you click on any of them, it'll tell you a little bit about the farms, show you some pictures. I think the most important parts are this about part, which Alex was just mentioning, trying to communicate to the public and let them have an inside peek on that, as well as contact information, so you could get in touch with them on whatever they're making available. And then probably most importantly for us, their products, what they are actually growing at these farms, or raising in some cases. And I'm a big regenerative agriculture fan, and I think that's got, I think we're on the ground floor of a skyscraper for that. So farming practices. And of course, here's a couple of icons that relate to that. And then finally, where to buy those products. So that's what we were working on. We were already starting with that, but so I knew that I would have to improve this site to really meet this challenge. So to fully solve this challenge, what we'd have to do is enable geolocation for real-time data. So what Alex, was saying is like, what's this crop? Kind of the scenario is probably driving down I-5 or driving down one of our windy little roads through the county and seeing a farm and wondering, hey, what am I growing here? So to do that, we would have to enable geolocation feature to this app. We'd also have to create on the page a spot for questions and answers so that people could contact the farm directly through our site and say, ask a question to the farmer. And then if the farmer approves it, they could publish that question and then address that. And then finally, providing some more, marketing the products to the customers. And really that means providing more information. So there's quite a few farms and ranches that work strictly on a B2B relationship. And that's important to know because those farms and ranches, that product is going to end up in something else that's either going to be on your freezer or it's going to be labeled under another product. but it's still very important to understand where that's originating so that you can still support those local farms. And that happens a heck of a lot. We had a big co-packing facility up here that recently went out of business, but they handled a lot of the Willamette Valley's farms, and they were a lot of those products were labeled under different. A lot of those products went into different labels, and so now that NORPAC has gone out of business, there's even less transparency into where our local farms products are going to, and then to satiate Alex's desire, provide more statistics. And I think that's a cool thing that we can also deliver on. So that's simply things like how much revenue that crop might bring in the state per year, how that stacks up nationally or perhaps internationally, why this crop matters, the history of it, and really that type of information on the statistical side of it. So there is a business model on this, because a lot of people say, hey, if you're creating this and you're creating this for free, because we don't charge the farmers or the ranchers to be part of it, how would you be able to make this thing survive beyond a hobby? And for us, that means creating, taking the user behavior that's on that site. So it's very similar to a few other sites, IMDb, Yelp, Goodreads. If anyone's does mountain climbing, there's a project called rock climbing called Mountain Project that's also very similar. And so what we're doing here is we're creating a robust database, and then we're sharing it with the public. The user behavior on the site is aggregated and anonymized. And then the preferences and trends that we're seeing occur could be of increasing value to the farms and ranches. So we could supply it to the farms and ranches and let them know, hey, people in the 97477 zip code are most often searching for these 5 products, and they're the least most popular ones are these. But the people that would actually pay for that are quite a large industry. So that would be anything from supermarket chains, restaurants, hotels, logistics companies or food distribution, institutional buyers, and other entities like that would use yearly subscriptions. So here's kind of the big 3 that I think of when I think of products that do this, which is aggregate data, standardize it, make it available to the public, and then really make their money off of licensing that to other interested entities. And all 3 of them are pretty successful. IMDb and Goodreads definitely. Yelp has hit some hard times lately. It's reflected in their stock price. But but I guess it just goes to prove that there's plenty of these models out there, and these are probably 3 of the biggest ones. What I'm really interested, though, is everything I was just mentioning as far as All the Farms product. It's really something that's downstream from that potential statewide data hub that Alex and Kara were just talking about. And to me, when I look at the data hub product or project, you can really collapse what's that crop as well as the application process. They can both be collapsed under this data hub, because what we were doing with all the farms is really something that would be downstream from the data hub. If there was a robust statewide agriculture ranching data hub, all that information is going into one central point, and then it's really easy from that point to make visible, according to those farms and ranchers' desires, to put that information on a site like mine. So over this week, I went around and I talked to a few of the stakeholders that might be involved with that type of data hub, and I had also relationships with these people through building the All the Farm site. So I kind of knew where they stood on the All the Farm site, and that's pretty positive. But I wanted to really test them out to hear what their appetite might be for a statewide ag data hub. Sorry, I'm trying to keep my eye on the clock here. So John Boyles, the Senior VP of Marketing at Market of Choice, and I'll provide these slides to anyone that's interested, because I realize it's pretty dense. But suffice to say that he's excited for the possibility of this. So he sees significant benefits to both his business as far as a grocery chain, as well as farmers and beverage producers and a lot of the other ones. And then I guess the key there is that, you know, he hasn't seen a strong central hub that leverages today's technologies for this. So he finds value there. And then I also asked him to list some stuff. So I realized this is really dense, and we've only got 10 minutes, so I'm not going to read through all of this. But there's a couple of key things here. And I think the most important one that I saw was that the hub could also serve as a way for farmers to share ideas and best practices and things like that. That's something that to me is very positive. I also spoke with Elizabeth Nardi from Organically Grown Company. I don't know if you all know Organically Grown Company, but I would, if you live out here, I'm darn confident that you probably get some food on a regular basis from off of their trucks. They're one of the biggest organic food distributors in the country, as well as just plain and out food distributors in the Pacific Northwest. So I was asking Elizabeth, hey Elizabeth, if we were to do a data hub, you know, what would this mean to you? And the one thing that really stuck out for me that she mentioned would be the real-time ability to kind of put out the food beacon and say, hey, we have an urgent need for a product, and we're looking for other farms or ranches that are carrying it. So that scenario might be something that we're in today with the coronavirus epidemic. And if there's a kale farm that was supposed to be able to provide kale to Organically Grown Company, but due to an illness of their workers, they're behind or can't meet that demand or something they've agreed to, you'd be able to go onto the data hub and put out a message to all interested parties that are growing kale and see if you could get that product. And there were other, you know, really cool things. So in the reverse of that, you know, there's the scenario where Organically Grown Company puts out the feed beacon and says, hey, we need this product. But there's also the ability to reverse that. And that's having farms and ranches, they have the ability to also ping the food distributors and others in the food chain that they might have a certain product and that they want to exit quickly. And then the last person I spoke with was Janet Dodson, who's a rancher out in Eastern Oregon, comes from a ranching family. And she also works with Travel Oregon as an ag tourism partner. So she you know, helps get people onto the Travel Oregon site and connecting, really doing a lot of vacation materials and media to the public to try to get people excited about Eastern Oregon. So if some of you I know are in the ag and ranch industry, so you'll know this, but there's a lot of tension around something called COOL and COOL legislation. That's country of origin labeling. And it's gone back and forth. But the bottom line comes down to when you get a piece of meat or steak or something like that that says made in the USA, that's not necessarily true. That beef or whatever it might be could very easily be raised in other countries and then imported over here and processed for really just a step or two. And then you can put that label on there. So what that means to us is that there's not transparency in what we're eating in those products. And then really on top of that, we're also not being able to support our neighboring ranches and support their products. So that's really important. And Janet brought that up. So what should we do? Well, we should expand the data set that right now we have on all the farms, and that'll help Oregonians buy more local food and as well as choose towards the farming methods that they want to support. Can we do this? Yeah, the project is achievable and scalable. And because, really because of how cloud infrastructure and how inexpensive that is and analytics, you can do this type of a product much less inexpensively than you could even 5 years ago or so. And should we do this? Yeah, heck yeah. You know, building out a platform for finding local and sustainable farms is minimal compared to the returns. And I don't mean the returns for me exclusively and people that work at all the farms. I mean the returns for our wider agriculture and ranching community. So really that's it. You know, I skipped one thing in this presentation, and I don't know how. I must have went over it, but I did have an ask. I penciled out what here we go. Let me just jump back in for this last slide, then I'll leave. So most of the work on this has been done on the tech side. I do some other work in tech, so I'm able to pursue these kind of passion projects. But for a really small amount, we can totally become a leader as a state in building out something like this and helping our neighbors be informed, as well as get their products to the public that wants it. So roughly $5,000 in marketing, and that would be put towards working with the Oregon Extension Services, going places with them, and getting the word out about this product to the farms and ranches that they work with. $5,000 for data collection. We roughly add somewhere around like 6 farms per hour if someone's really plugging away at it. So that's at a basis of paying someone around $12.50 an hour. And then $10,000 to complete the platform so that it would meet the challenge and what we wanted to do there. And this is the What's That Crop challenge. So that's building out the API for it, as well as an analytics tool, adding some of the cosmetic changes, spot for farmers and ranchers to take questions and then publish those questions, as well as make the geolocating possible. Let me go to the end now. So now I'm gonna have to go all back to the end. So that's what I'm here to talk about. I'm here to talk about figuring out what's that crop, but I'm also very, very interested in this type of data. It should be downstream from an agriculture data hub, but it just as well could go upstream to that and kind of supply an instant boost in the type of data that they have.
That was great, Jim. I just want to also give Jim sort of the biggest thank you possible for participating this last week, because he's been on every call. He showed up to the office hours over the weekend on Saturday. So I just really appreciate your enthusiasm and your creativity for this week, for this challenge. So I'll open it to the judges if they have some questions or thoughts.
This is Gary here. Hey, I just appreciated the emphasis on the monetary benefit and how the players in it can benefit from the data and how users could use it. I think we start thinking that through, that's going to help. That was a really good key area you pulled out of that. Thank you, Jim.
And this is Laura. Jim, how can it move to a self-sustaining model, much like IMDb and Yelp, so that it's not, requiring a developer to enter, to build that library of assets so that it can be a self-entered, and then what would be the policing or, verification of that? Has that been in mind?
Sure. So as far as making it self-sustaining, what I most often think about that is IMDb is a great model. So IMDb, of course, when they start, they don't have they have to start with some type of a library of movies that generates people going there to look for it, and then eventually becomes the spot where movie studios go to post their information. Another product that really does this well, but that's kind of a niche one, is that one called Mountain Project. So Mountain Project was by a couple of people who are rock climbers, and they were interested, very similar to myself, in kind of building something that they want to see. So they put out the effort to build out the tech side and then seed Mountain Project with, I think, around 2,000 different rock climbing sites and some information about the trails around there. And then it took off because the community got to find out about it, and it had that positive momentum on the data side. So they eventually exited to REI. That's who owns Mountain Project now, and it's very successful project. It was a very successful product for that niche and people that are interested in that. As for the policing of the data that goes on, Laura, that's our biggest challenge. I haven't figured out a way. I think that if it was something to be working with at a statewide agriculture data hub, that really solves a lot of that. But on its own, I couldn't stop right now. There's an opportunity to enter information on your own farm. So if you wanted to add Rumbel Farm, and whether you have one or not, you'd be able to do that. It would be up to me and my co-founder to take a look at that and see what type of a website it leads to, and just do some basic work. But someone could put forth an effort to put some phony stuff up there, and they would deceive us on that. I think that's just one of the elements of putting out a crowdsourced project that's like that. And hopefully, perhaps if there was some false data up there, there's of course a chance to contact us through the site, and someone could report that.
Thank you.
Well, Jim, that was a great lead-in into our data hub, and sort of the last, and sort of I think the challenge that we've probably talked the most about over the course of the last week. I'm gonna give it over to John Ruffing, if he's around, or if that's appropriate, if he's prepared.
Yeah, can you guys hear me okay?
Yep, I hear you great.
Great, perfect. I'm gonna share my screen here. Hold on real quick. Sorry about that. Should have been a little bit more prepared. All right. Perfect. How's that? Thanks, guys.
Good. Yep.
Yeah, and Jim, thank you. I appreciate that. We actually chatted a bit, and Jim's had a little bit of experience using some of the Esri kind of platform and some of the data stuff that he does a lot of work around for his website. So I found a lot of interest in that, and I appreciate it. So today's challenge is around the statewide Ag Data Hub. My name is John Ruffing. I work with Esri. If you're not really familiar with Esri, we basically are an IT and GIS data management company for mapping, analytics, and visualizations. And also with me is John Stroud. John, do you want to do a quick introduction? You on here? Maybe he's still muted. So he's with the Timmins Group, and we both kind of worked on this together jointly. So it was actually a really fun project. I am not an agricultural specialist, but where we really shine is with the geospatial information, and tapping into what the state has, and working with this information and sharing it out for the community as a whole to tap into, developers, farmers, citizens, et cetera, is kind of really important. I think the main topic that everyone's kind of been touching on today, which is great. So the problem, we'll kind of start with that problem statement. And this is in specific regards to the Ag Challenge and how to leverage existing technology investments to create a data hub that can scale to host all of Oregon crop information, run analytics, and determine a way to compensate the growers for sharing this information. And so the solution, what we have, establish a new commodity by making agricultural farmers' data in Oregon a new virtual crop, right? So this new commodity can now be treated as a data asset for the state or the individuals, the stakeholders involved within that State Data Hub. So kind of in regards to that solution overview, really it's driven by the Oregon agricultural data. So as you'll see here, this is a pretty fancy slide. I definitely did not do the graphics on this. So I wish I was that creative, but I did not. But what you'll have is that data information going in, the computing infrastructure that's in the cloud, on-prem, because you're gonna have a huge amount of different data sources kind of flowing into the statewide data hub. Ag innovation, your open APIs, your different type of information that's being fed. Is that real time? Is that big data, web services, et cetera? And then that's being fed through some type of curator in how they're going to really liberate this information. And that's going to be the DAS Enterprise Information Services, that statewide kind of individual area within the government that's going to be curating this information and pushing it out to really improve the services to the citizens or the different individuals getting access to this information. That might be farmers, taxpayers, other type of individuals, developers, startups, et cetera, to get this information and start utilizing it and potentially monetizing it too. So how it works. So a quick little shot here. I was actually today creating this hub website, which is great. And this is technology that the state actually has within their capabilities to be able to get this information out. And here's an Oregon open data. That's kind of the basic foundation behind what the hub is, but then really how you start to leverage the collaboration efforts, working with your different agencies, working with the feds, working with the locales. Those might be the cities, those are the counties, your NGOs, your farmers, your authoritative farmers. It's really important to keep that in mind, because this overall structure of a statewide data hub, there is going to be a governance structure associated to that as well. And kind of what we like to say, a system of systems. So really it's a services-oriented architecture is what you're going after, but that can be all different depending on where that information is coming from and how it's being curated and governed, and then being reestablished and pushed out to that community that's going to be accessing it, right? But that authoritativeness is really important, because you don't want to start getting all this different type of data, and then, you know, that can be devalued as it moves along in that process. So ownership and authoritativeness is important for that. So where does that hub sit really? You know, you have the government side of things that you'll see. That's the data asset management, the compliancy, really liberating this information and data and the performance and metrics. And then in between there, you'll have the hub. That's where the website, the portal per se, the connectivity, the collaboration is really happening. And then you have the community individuals getting access to this. That's the farmers, the startup developers, the different types of data and apps. Just as Jim had said, maybe there's an app that an individual creates that want to share it back out through that, you know, hub. And, you know, that's a possibility depending on how that's governed, view distribution, etc. And so got some nice little lines here. And what we have here, really, you know, again, in that middle, you'll see that's where that hub sits. And the open data on the right side, typically what you'll see in that progression is, let's just get our data up, let's make it available, and then push it out for it being searchable. Now, how is that governed is a little bit different. Who is taking ownership of that data? What different department, agency, city or county, where is that authoritative data coming? How is it curated, et cetera? And then also, what are the priorities for the government? Why is this statewide data hub being pushed out? What are the initiatives that they're driving for? Is that going to be, you know, economic development? Is that going to be agriculturally focused around X initiative for the state? So it goes from moving that ad hoc, pushing out this information, which is extremely necessary. And that's actually one of the websites I just kind of put together for that. I think that's also DC information. I kind of pulled it and made it, I localized it a little bit. And then in the middle sits that hub. So how this kind of operates is, within the hub, there's team formations that work between these different groups who authoritatively own the information. And then you can have apps created, you can have, you know, different types of data stories that you're trying to tell around that. What are the initiatives per different agency? So within that hub, and you can't really see, there's actually a lot more to this website that you have. So it's formulated around that governance and then who you're working with. And then you're setting it within the hub, you're actually setting up teams. And so then they're curating and operating from their department, making sure this information that they're, you know, either mandated to push this information out in a formulated, you know, transparent way that is governed by the state. So that when it's being pushed out to these individuals, you know, on the developer side, on the farmer side, that they're getting accurate information and not just kind of, you know, messy data. It's really important for folks. So it is, again, sitting in that middle, you'll see where that hub sits. So, you know, it's kind of a short few slides here, but really the next step to address the high level needs is getting the enterprise data strategy and the inventory through that open data and technical standards. And the next slide will kind of go into the high level needs, but really that increased transparency, that's important. So where is that data sitting? How much of it? Let's get a complete inventory of all the data sets. Where is it living? What is it? Files, geospatial context, et cetera, et cetera. And improve collaboration between the agencies. And that's really, I think, the most important. I should have highlighted here, but that is between those different agencies. That's the feds and the locale. So, you know, the agricultural data, where is it coming from? What's the importance of it? And then collaborating with those individuals when it's going to be shared out within that governance construct. And then you have the automated data sharing that's really important too, through that open data format. So then kind of the high level needs, what I was hearing, the ag data inventory is important, the data liberation towards that open data program so folks can get access to it and start creating these different types of apps, start creating different solutions with that information that they're receiving. But again, making sure that it is governed and it is authoritative. It is part of a system of systems that are operating together in coordination and collaboration between these different departments. And the analytical capabilities to observe the current statuses, trends, actionable decisions, etc. Establish new virtual crop. I like the term, that virtual crop, and it's specific to this ag challenge. So we get the inventory of the information that's available out there, and then you can start to kind of monetize that virtual crop information from downstream, or like Jim had said, back upstream once those apps or solutions are created, which I think is really important. And then between that, that's the ag data governance and strategies. Who's taking ownership of that? Is that the agricultural department? Does it fall on the IT groups, you know, within the state level? And then ultimately, how is that data being curated and governed between those two individual agencies? And then, you know, really develop and maintain an operational awareness for existing ag data. And that kind of comes back to how the hub will facilitate that in those different areas. Yeah, so that was it. That was my slide deck. Hopefully I fell in the 8-minute time frame.
You're great. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Before I open up to our panel of judges, I want to offer our guest judge first crack, because we've been talking about Data Hub, you know, we've been talking about it for weeks/months. And so we're really excited that you could join us tonight and hear kind of what our thinking was around this. So Catherine, if you're there, I'd love to hear some thoughts or some feedback.
Yeah, I mean, so the nice thing is that y'all have bought into my position far more than I have to some extent. So this is great. But kind of talking about that overarching governance structure, I think one of the things that you've articulated that the state hasn't really hit with its data maturity yet is that feedback loop of what data should be made publicly available based upon economic development opportunities, based upon, you know, businesses that are operating within the state that require that data. And I think, you know, tying it back to Kara and Alex's discussion around kind of the regulatory landscape, right? If we can get to the point where this data is pooled effectively, it also means that we can theoretically start designing more streamlined services associated with compliance. And that's sort of the mission that I sell state agencies on. And I think starting with our Department of Ag is a really good spot to start having that conversation. There is sort of a new mandate from my office that's taking effect in 21, mandating that agencies inventory and publish open data. But the place that they really have not received a lot of guidance yet is, okay, if theoretically everything has to be published, how do I start? And so giving people a platform and a space to start identifying those data assets that are of a high priority really kind of sets everyone on the right foot. I will say, I think from a governance perspective, the resourcing at the state is not yet in a maturity level where we have that centralized governance, but I'm working on it.
No, I mean, I think too, what we see with a lot of folks is, you know, it's not always technology, it's the people process, right?
Oh my goodness, yes.
I mean, and really, I think a lot of people sometimes think that it's technology problem, and for, at least from my perspective and experiences too, it's the people process first always, and then the technology. So yeah, I feel for you, Catherine. I feel for you.
if our other judges, thank you, Catherine. I just really appreciate that you're on the call and that you could sort of see what all the conversation's been about for the whole week. So I really, really appreciate your time. And I'm more to come, I'm sure, because this sounds like we might do something here. So
no, I'm here and I'm excited, and I'm glad that we also have people from the Department of Ag in here, because it means that there's a state agency that is excited and actively engaged in wanting to have this conversation, and getting agencies connected to their stakeholders and the people that they serve can be one of the bigger hurdles in identifying how we prioritize this data. So the fact that, again, this loop is already here is incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. With that, Gary, I'm actually going to call you out on the spot, just if you had any thoughts from, you seemed to get pretty excited when we pitched this about a month ago at our meetup about this idea or the notion. So I'd be curious to hear what you're thinking.
You know, I appreciated the presentation, and I'm a little bit overwhelmed because we always, it comes back to the people process in my mind of we want the data we want, but how do we prioritize that on a bigger, I mean, not just agencies, but also silos within agencies, and then programs under that. There's layer upon layer, which is, I guess, part of the task to tackle is how do you prioritize and make that reliable data and have value. So that was, nothing to add really.
No, I think, yeah, you're spot on. And that's one thing I think with Esri, at least, I'm, from my standpoint, I work a lot with the county and city folks, and, to be quite honest, 95% of them, to some extent, utilize our technology, but it's really underutilized. They use it, but it's underutilized. And connecting those dots between the city, counties, or even private industry or individuals that have that information that can push it up back to the state and to the feds, they all have that interconnectivity. And I think that's where things are actually going. And with that services, architecture, that's where I'm really I'm starting to see a lot of, aha moments in folks and how they work together. And then once that information is curated and governed and, prioritize what is able to be shared through that processes like Catherine was talking about, and then pushing that information back out to be able to have the citizens, startups, developers, farmers get access easily to it. That is ultimately really what I want to see happen. So.
That's great. Laura, did you have anything, or Josh, that you wanted to?
All I wanted to say was that it was such a great presentation, really well thought through. I'm just still kind of processing it all. I mean, I've been hearing about this nascently, right, from Alex and others. It's been a great, I just see a lot of tie into this with other things that we discussed earlier. So I'm just, again, I'm just processing. Really, really, really useful and well, great idea. I'm super excited about it.
And this is Josh. Same, I'll echo the sentiments. This is really cool, and the fact that we have some agencies on this call that can actually move this along potentially is exciting, because I think you don't often get that in these kind of statewide initiatives. So this is really cool to see, and hopefully we see more of this get some traction. So good job.
Thank you.
Well, before I give it back to Kara, I just want to say thank you from my perspective for everybody who participated and all the great conversations and ideas. It feels like the culmination of one thing, but also the start of many more. So I'm hoping that we can do more of these. And I really appreciate everybody actually spending the time. And I think it went really, really well for, to do this virtually. I think this actually in some ways worked out even better. So Kara, I'm gonna hand it to you if you have any, or Sean, I guess, any final thoughts?
I'm gonna give a couple of final thoughts before I hand it off to Sean. I think we've kind of already gone over lessons learned, but one lesson learned is that generally in these situations, a room is secured for the judges to go and discuss who they think was the best presentation. And we do have our really generous offer from Josh of the WeWork lab membership, but we don't have that luxury. And in spite of doing some Googling and research, I'm not really sure how to send y'all off into a private room. So we're going to pause, and I'm going to ask y'all to maybe shoot me some feedback tomorrow, and I'll send a note asking for that, and then we'll make an announcement. And I'm going to say some quick thank yous before I hand it over to Sean. And I'll start with thanking everybody that's hung with us this week. It's 7:15 on the West Coast, which means it's 10:15 on the East Coast, and we still have 33 people on this call. So thank you to everyone that participated. If you had told me a week ago that I would have a stand-up call every day, including Saturday and Sunday, with folks from around the country to talk about rural ag initiatives and how to innovate around them, I probably would have laughed. And so it's been really inspiring to me to get to work with all of you. So round of applause and a pat on the back to everyone who's participated, everyone who's put thought into this. Catherine, as our guest judge, gets a thank you because her team, one of whom it lives in Monmouth and is familiar with independence, has been pretty critical. And so thank you to literally everyone who's participated. We're going to say thank you again to our judges, Josh, Laura, Gary, Catherine. We cannot thank you enough for the time that you've devoted to us tonight and throughout this entire process. And for better or worse, you are now stuck with us, and we are going to continue moving some of these forward. I think that there's something pretty compelling around the wine goggles from both groups that pitched those, and I have a feeling that Bruce would like to hear those presentations. He texted me and said, "I'm sure you're drinking my wine, but I can't figure out how to get into the meeting." So we toasted him, and we'll get him to follow up. So thank y'all for all of that support. Thank you to our farmers, our producers, our growers that all gave us the challenges. And then obviously a big thank you to Alex and Sean, my partners in crime, but really to Sean for being the one that funded this. And I have two things that I would like to read before we call it quits with Sean. You know, we started this hoping that we would be able to bridge some of this rural urban divide and really talk about like how innovation and entrepreneurship is happening in our rural communities. And then we got this overlay of stay at home and ag being a essential industry. And I think we're all a little more sensitive, or at least I know I am, to what's happening across the ecosystem. And I got a note from Nate yesterday after we talked to him. And so I'm going to express our growers' gratitude as I close this out. He said, it's having people like you guys in our corner that's going to get us through this whole thing. So I think that's pretty cool. And then I have to look at my phone because when I ordered the awesome chocolate-covered hazelnuts that I've eaten like 750 calories worth of the entire bag from the folks at Ash Creek, the Riddle Farms team, they sent a note back and it said, your support to our farm family during these difficult seasons means more than you know. We hope you and your loved ones are safe and healthy. Thanks for your kind words. P.S. Customers like you are the reason we started this company in the first place. You are all so very much appreciated. So I don't think I can really add anything to that. So I'm going to let Sean finish us up as our main sponsor.
Cool. Well, yeah, I don't think I have much to add. That was a great kind of wrap up there, Kara. I think the one thing I will touch on is something that actually Pete did a good job of identifying, which was he had that image of the ag tech capitals of the United States, which were all these cities. And he noted that all of those pictures looked very similar. And I think that's a differentiating factor for rural communities. And frankly, that's why we're here is, we're trying to create prosperity in rural communities, show how it can happen. And one of the advantages that rural communities have is, our rural communities are grounded in their environment. Cities look pretty similar wherever they are. They're big enough that they have kind of all the same things. But rural communities are really unique based on the characteristics of the region that they are in. And I think that's an advantage for challenges like this, where we can go and create these direct connections to the growers and the people who are scratching out a living around here, and work with them directly to identify solutions that can potentially scale elsewhere, because we have that solid grounded connection. So with that, yeah, I will definitely say thank you to everybody who participated. It was great having folks from across the country, and definitely here within Oregon as well. Big thank you to TAO for putting this on and figuring out how to do this, especially with the added challenge at the last minute of, hey, why don't we just keep on going and do this whole thing virtually? I think it came off really well. And I think, this is the start of something. This is a great beginning, and you're going to hear more about this in more of these kind of things coming in the next year plus. We're definitely going to keep on going. So thank you all for participating. Hope to see you face to face sometime in Independence. We can share a beer.
Hey, Justin, this is kind of late, a little bit late, but this is Breanne Howard with Google. I live here in Yamhill County, and I just wanted to let you guys know that we're definitely paying attention to what y'all are doing and super excited to see how we can fit in the future. So just wanted to let you know that we've been listening in, and I'd love to talk with you when you guys have a chance. So
awesome. Look forward to connecting.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for doing this.
Team, that's a wrap. When you get the surveys, just remember, no one's ever done this virtually before, so we'll take your feedback. Be graceful and gentle. Everyone have a great night. Stay safe. And I also owe you the beer. I think I have to pay for the beer and pizza when we can all get together in Independence. That was part of the contract we had with Sean. So until then, cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks, folks.
Thanks.